Welcome to this podcast where we'll be exploring the inspiring journey of someone who's overcome great adversity. Throughout our lives, we all face challenges that can seem insurmountable. These obstacles can be physical, emotional, financial, or social, and they can test us in ways we never imagined. In this podcast, we will hear the powerful story of someone who has faced adversity head-on and emerged stronger on the other side. Through the struggles, they have gained invaluable sight and wisdom, which they will share with us today. We'll hear about their lowest moments, the hurdles they faced, and the triumphs that followed. We will learn about the people who supported them along the way and the strategies they used to keep moving forward, even when the going got tough. The purpose of this podcast is to provide inspiration and motivation to those who are currently facing adversity. We hope that by hearing about someone else's journey, you'll be encouraged to keep pushing forward and never give up on your dreams. So get ready to be inspired as we embark on this journey through adversity together. Welcome to the second episode of Journey Through Adversity, and today we have Kat Lichten. Welcome, Kat.
Thank you for having me on today, Kerry.
No problems, and sorry for keeping you waiting for so long out there.
No worries.
So what we want to do, we had a great feedback from listening to Stephen on our first podcast, and we want to continue this and listen to Kat's story today about her journey with Teddy and his diagnosis. And basically, we had a chat a few times on Instagram about how you've got through it, how you're getting through it, how you dealing with things pre-Teddy being diagnosed. But let's hear about you and Kat and what's everything happened to you.
Yeah, so it was really interesting. I was actually listening to Stephen's episode on the train on the way over, and it was quite interesting, hearing about his story and slightly different situations, because he had been, through a really long journey with his daughter, who say it's 5.5 years, which is just incredible. And they were very much, kind of at like the post-treatment phase and dealing with the after effects of that treatment and the shockwaves that it kind of sends through your life. And then in my situation, we're very much in the trenches at the minute with Teddy's treatment, because he was diagnosed with high-risk neuroblastoma last July.
Okay.
And we are currently 10 months into what's going to be around a 17, 18-month treatment plan. So he's hopefully going to be finishing his treatment around December this year.
Okay.
Yeah. And we've just started radiotherapy for Teddy. He's having 20 sessions of radiotherapy daily, so 5 days a week, and having a general anaesthetic every day. So that is really intense. We've come through a lot of intense treatment. We've still got intense treatment to go. It's sort of, we're very much in the cancer world.
You are.
Right now.
But you are in a community where there are a lot of supportive parents around that have been there. And like I say, I've found that myself. There is a world on Instagram and there's a world on Facebook, and there's obviously what we've set up, the Children's Cancer platform, that there are lots of parents out there that, just like you, want to tell their story and share their experiences. And if you can pick out one thing that you've done that can help someone else, then it's worth even coming on the podcast to speak about it. So before we talk about life with Teddy now, let's talk about life beforehand. And how was Kat beforehand? And Alistair, is it?
Yeah, my husband's Alistair.
And obviously, Teddy's 3 years old. We were just discussing that you were marketing at McDonald's.
Yes, that's
I believe.
right.
Yeah. So in the career world, and you have a little 1-year-old at home.
We do.
You
little
do.
Rupert.
Yeah. And so how has, obviously, the diagnosis and stuff, how has that completely upturned everything that you were planning to do and to start with? And let's just go back to that and work out before what was happening.
Yeah, so prior to Teddy's diagnosis, I was on maternity leave with our youngest. So Rupert was born in February 2022. So I had finished work, I was on maternity leave. Our lives were kind of very, very normal for a family with 2 very small children. Teddy went to preschool a couple of mornings a week. I would be at home with the baby. On the times that Teddy was home, we'd be going to the park. We'd be meeting up with friends. We'd be going to see grandparents.
The normal, everyday sort of life, yeah.
Yeah, completely. Our world was quite small, but very, very normal. It was mostly based around the village where we lived, and getting out and about and seeing friends who live locally, seeing family. He had a very nice, very, very simple life for a small child. He turned 3 in June last year.
Okay.
And he kind of had a run of just being under the weather, infection after infection after infection. It seemed that he would have you know, an ear infection, and then he had tonsillitis, and then just general coughs and colds and RSV, all of which seemed
You
not
think it's normal
unusual.
as a 3-year-old going to preschool and things?
100%. All of my friends who had children of a similar age, you know, we would be messaging each other going, oh, sorry, I can't meet up today. So-and-so's got hand, foot and mouth. So-and-so's got chicken pox. So-and-so's got a vomiting bug. So he really didn't seem, you know, hugely to be sick, much more than you would expect. But he did have a really nasty run of it. And then he just really suddenly one day started complaining of pain in his sides. And we took him to the doctors. They completely checked him over, seemed absolutely fine. We even went to soft play that afternoon, and he was running around soft play like a crazy thing for about an hour. We've got videos of him, you know, climbing up equipment and throwing himself around, right on his stomach where his tumour was, even, and having a whale of a time. And then, you know, that night he was up all night crying. Took him to A&E the following morning, and it was only, you know, kind of just over a week of, we went in, we went home, we went back in again, and in just over a week from that point, the first time he complained about pain, we were told that he had, you know, grapefruit-sized mass in his abdomen. And not only that, it became quickly apparent from the tests and things that he underwent that he had significant involvement in his bone marrow and also lesions all over his body. They didn't show us his scans at the time, but we did subsequently see them after thankfully he responded really well to his initial chemo. So actually all of his metastases, so where the cancer has spread in his body,
Been cleared up
they all cleared within 4 rounds of
Brilliant.
his 6 rounds of induction chemo. So at that point was when they kind of showed us the initial scans, and it was just, you know, it was terrifying. He was lit up like a Christmas tree.
I didn't see mine with you. My wife saw them. I don't know about you, but I was paranoid. I didn't want to see it. I was played ignorant.
I didn't want to see them initially. And I'm really glad I didn't, having subsequently seen them.
Yeah. Because I had that view. I was like, well, ignorance is bliss. Just tell me what I need to do.
Yeah.
Tell me what's going on. But so let's go back to that night you were told. I mean, if it's obviously it's an emotional night, an emotional time. I remember being told. So how did those words get told to you, or spoken to you? What was your initial feeling, and how? Like, obviously, it's an emotional experience because you never think that's what we call it. You never think it's you. It's always something else you read about. But how did you find that? Obviously,
it was yeah, it's almost indescribable, really. Like how quickly things turn in your world as well. So we initially were worried that Teddy had appendicitis.
I'm exactly everything you're saying is just runs completely what we thought as well when Huey had it.
Yeah,
so you're thinking appendicitis is the worst thing.
Yeah,
and you're worrying about operations. And
appendicitis now seems like, God, I wish it had been appendicitis. How wonderful would that have been if he had appendicitis? At the time, I was very, very worried because I thought it could burst. He could get sepsis. He could die if he has appendicitis. You know, the best outcome would be that he needed major surgery, long recovery. You know, that was terrifying enough. And I wasn't really, they kind of wanted to discharge him and I wasn't really happy. So I asked, you know, I really want him to have an ultrasound to just confirm that there's nothing going on with the appendix. And one of the doctors there sort of saw him in a lot of pain. One time, you know, children in pain, it goes up and down.
Yeah.
Adults in pain generally present very differently to children. Children, it kind of tends to go up and down. So thankfully, a doctor saw him when he was actually in a lot of pain and, you know, agreed with me that they wanted to do that investigation. So I went down to the ultrasound department with Teddy. This whole time we've got a 4-month-old in hospital with us as well who would not take a bottle. Right. So he had to be, if I was in hospital, Rupert had to be in hospital, and I couldn't be away from him for more.
And that's an added stress in itself, like especially with that feeding. Yeah, we spent the first 4 months as well establishing feeding and.
Yeah, he wanted to feed every hour and a half to 2 hours, so I had to be there the whole time, and even if someone else was looking after him, you know, I often had to run back to be with him. So I went down to the ultrasound and it just seemed to be lasting forever, taking a really, really, really long time. And then all of a sudden I became aware that someone else had walked into the room, and I hadn't been aware that they had called anyone or anything. So I don't know if they have like a little panic button or something that is like, we need someone else in here. And then they introduce themselves to me as a consultant. So I'm thinking, okay, something is a bit adrift here. Yeah. And then I heard her whisper to the tech, where did you see the mass? And instantly my heart, I'm getting emotional.
No, you would do, wouldn't you? Because your heart drops.
Yeah, it was literally like, my stomach kind of fell out through my ass. And in that moment,
husband in the room with you at the time?
No, he wasn't. So then, we were trying to continue to scan Teddy with the consultant there. He was getting more and more upset because he'd been sat on a table for 45 minutes with people prodding his stomach.
He's worried as well.
Yeah, and then, we kind of went back upstairs onto the ward, and then I was just sat there with this new information that I'd had and didn't really know what it meant. There were still tests and things that needed to be done to find out. And the next day he had an MRI, and then shortly after that they kind of came in and told us that Teddy did have cancer. Nothing really prepares you for that moment, because it's just your whole world just implodes.
And you do go. I think I remember the thing that I remember the most was the coldness running through my veins, just the ice. And then I just remember going into a stare for about 5 minutes, just like people were talking around me, and we were in COVID, so we had to do. Everyone was wearing a mask, so you couldn't really see the emotion or anything from a doctor's point of view.
Yeah.
Because I think mouth gives it a lot of way of emotion and things. So you're dealing with just eyes, and some of the doctor's eyes were just staring at you, and they were talking at me. I don't know about you, but your head's just gone, what? And
it's like in a cartoon where a bomb goes off and then all the person can hear is just, a high-pitched whining noise. Everything just kind of... It really is like a bomb has just gone off in your life, and you kind of get the sense that nothing is going to be the same afterwards. And, I mean, my husband... At the time, it was me and my husband in the room with Teddy just sort of coming round from his MRI on the bed, and then my husband holding our youngest. And then my husband stood up holding Rupert, and then he kind of was like, I think I might fall over.
Yeah.
And sort of sat down, and then someone took Rupert off him.
So, but all of a sudden, though, I think, I don't know, you might find that you all of a sudden became that unit of 4 of you. That is it, your little army is the 4 of you. You're going to fight this. And then once, I remember it for myself, and it might be the same as you, once that initial shock of it is over, and of them telling you, but all of it, it's like you're waiting for all the pieces to fall on the ground. You're like, right, okay, what are we going to do? What's the next plan of action?
Yeah.
And that was my positive sort of mindset to it. Right, this is what they're saying to us, this is what it is, and then, right, how are we going to plan of action? And is that what they went straight into you? Like, this is the plan of action we're going to do, or did you have to like wait a while, or?
Yeah, frustratingly for us, it took quite a long time to get that plan of action in place. So the first night for us was just, real sort of confusion and just that real raw emotion. It was honest. It really honestly was like a grief, because I felt like I'd had, my life and our security and just our normal family existence just ripped away. And I didn't know what the future would hold for us. And I remember feeling surprised, and I've actually, having spoken to lots of other parents, I think this is actually quite a common experience, but I was really surprised by the strength of the anger that I felt.
Yeah.
So my main emotion on the initial diagnosis was kind of anger.
Who vented towards just in general, because there's no one to blame.
No, there's no one to blame. I'm not directed towards...
It's just why it has happened.
Yeah, I just felt angry at the world, angry that this was happening to us, to Teddy. Yeah. It felt unfair. So I was just very, very angry.
That's the hardest thing, is that how can your life just go from... I remember like the same week as Hugh was playing golf, he was fine. He complained of hip pain, Hugh did, that week of diagnosis, and he just put it down to groin pains. I was like, oh mate, just go to the toilet, you'll be all right. Maybe you need to go for a number 2 or whatever. He's like, oh, okay. And then he doesn't. But then I could see him, like, same as Teddy, was crying at night time, and he was just getting progressively worse. And there's only my wife pushed the doctors to take him on, and like they said, but they just it was just like a dark. Yeah, I just remember it's just that anger, but also like I had to switch off to everyone else in the world. So I couldn't go on Facebook. I couldn't go and listen to the radio. Everyone else's first world problems were like not insignificant to what we were going through as a unit.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I mean. Like Google was hard because you don't Google anything. All of a sudden you're just on your own and isolated. And I don't know, that's how you felt, especially in the hospital. Like it must be tough, especially with the little baby as well, having to be there for Rupert
Yeah, that
and
was
there for
really
Teddy
hard.
because he wants his mummy to look after him. And yeah, it's just I mean, it must have been like tough on you.
Yeah, that was really hard. We were Rupert and I had managed to stay in. There's a Ronald McDonald House at the
Okay.
hospital in Brighton, which was where Teddy was diagnosed. They provide accommodation for families who have children in hospital, so that families can be together and near.
Yeah.
So the room that we were staying in was actually in the floor above Teddy,
Okay.
on the ward.
All right.
So I was up there with Rupert, and not long. We were told about his diagnosis about 6:30, and not long after that, I kind of needed to put Rupert to bed.
And also, Rupert wouldn't be sleeping as well. We'd wake
No.
up every 3 hours, so
No,
he
he
must have
wasn't
been
sleeping
absolutely
well.
shattered. Because at
Yeah,
least a good sleep, trying to sleep after, would actually help you process what's been told to you. But if you're up every 3 hours or 4 hours, I mean,
yeah,
it's been tough.
you don't get that downtime, and so shortly after we were told this life-changing news, I needed to put Rupert to bed. I needed to get him upstairs to the room, get him in his pajamas, give him a quiet feed, put him down, and I remember just having a complete meltdown because I didn't know how I was going to
Get
do
through
it. Yeah, and kind of crying and going, I can't do it. How am I going to do it? And like a nurse gave me a really lovely pep talk.
You are
She's
doing it.
Yeah.
You are. I know it's emotional, but you are doing it. So
Yeah.
you are, and you have no choice. As a mother, I remember my wife to say, you find this inner strength that just comes from nowhere. Like I remember watching as a program on Netflix, the 14 Peaks, whatever. But when he says when you feel 40%, you're only no. So when you feel really fucked, you're only 40% fucked. That's what he says
Yeah.
really on it. But which is quite true because when you've been told something like we've been told, you think, how am I going to do this? I don't know how to do it. But the mindset quickly shifts to right. Let's just be there for Hugh. Let's be there for Teddy. Let's get through it. We will get something. Will get through us, and we will get through this. And so you're here now talking about it. So you have done it, and so you found an inner strength to do so.
Yeah, I just did not know where I was going to find the strength. I felt like I didn't have the strength to do the one thing that I needed to do in the next hour, let alone the strength to, get through the next few weeks and months and, potentially years of our life. But you find you do it by increments. I think you just do that one next thing that you need to do.
Sort of short-term goals.
Yeah, and that's how I lived at the very beginning. It was just, real short-term goals. We just need to do tonight.
Yeah.
We just need to meet this doctor tomorrow. Then we need to get through to this scan or this surgery or,
Which is a good way to be because obviously you don't want to think too far ahead because that's when the thought starts running around your head. But you've got to stay in the present. As much as it's hard to do, stay in the present. I used to regret the past. I used to think in my head all the time, what did I miss something? Or was there something that I missed? But like you say, focusing on the present as you're doing really does help. And the short-term goals, especially having little targets. I don't know if and was there anything like you read or you looked at or searched to help you get through like stuff? Is there anything you could inspired you to do stuff?
It's kind of interesting that you said that at the beginning you didn't go on social media at all because as a millennial woman, my instant reaction was to go on Instagram.
Well, having seen what's on Instagram, I never went on it when I was with Hugh, and I just wanted to shut down because I think we were used to the COVID world of everyone just being on their own, and also I didn't want. Like everyone's different. I was frightened of people asking me questions and me trying to tell them answers that weren't true.
Yeah.
And also, I was also frightened of someone coming across his diagnosis and telling me something that I didn't want to hear. And that was also the other thing I didn't want to know about it. So I played ignorant to everything. And I only really told people when Hugh was 9 months down the line of treatment.
Yeah.
That's when, because we locked ourselves away through COVID. So I didn't want to answer questions, and when I used to see people, I used to just not talk about it. But everyone's different in the way that had to get through it. And but there is a world of mums and parents out there on Instagram that are talking and documenting and doing it. And then obviously that when you form that community, you see what other people are doing, which does help.
Yeah.
I can see why people would go on it now.
Yeah, because Google was not my friend.
No,
At that time, Google had, you know, very
Google's evil.
Google is evil. You know, it had very scary information about Teddy's cancer on it. Teddy's cancer does have a poor prognosis. So you know, I did come across a lot of scary information Googling it initially, and then going on Instagram, you know, searching hashtag neuroblastoma. Actually, like one of the first accounts I came across was a woman whose little boy is also called Teddy, and he's now I think nearly 4 years off treatment, and he's doing really, really well.
Brilliant.
And I saw her picture of her son, who was at the time I think 3 years off treatment, and just commenting like, "Oh my gosh, I really hope I see this for my son Teddy," because we've just been given this, you know, devastating diagnosis. And she was so kind, and she reached out to me, and she, you know, gave me her mobile number and was like WhatsApp messaging me in the middle of the night. You know, when I was really in those early days of just confusion, I didn't know what's going on.
I think that was so important just to hear it from someone who's experienced it.
Yeah.
Just to say, look, this is what's going to happen, because you just need to be like, it's like going on a flight. We've seen it's all turbulence, and you look to the air stewardesses to see if they're calm.
Yeah.
But that's what I was doing. And the doctors don't give anything away in hospital, and
No.
they don't ask them anything, from my experience. And then the nurses are the ones that normally give you the barometer of how things are. But it's when you've got someone that can actually say, well, hang on, this is what you're going through now. This is what you're going to expect. And someone give you advice on, like, so radiotherapy for Teddy right now.
Yeah.
This is what's going to, and then what's going to happen in the next few weeks after the radiotherapy. That's where the parent community can really help, because it can settle you down as your nerves. And like you say, Google is not, you can type into Google, the world is flat, and 30,000 pages come up, tell you the world is flat. So it's not all full of correct information.
Yeah, so I really did find a lot of help and support through Instagram in those early days by connecting with mostly mums.
Yep.
I find on Instagram, really, you know, mums who have children who are going through the same journey that we are with neuroblastoma, and it was really invaluable to speak to people who were at the same point in the journey as us, and sharing those really raw emotions.
Yeah.
You know, that we had. We were supporting each other through, you know, that initial raw emotion of finding out your child has cancer, and then also being able to speak to mums who were further along in treatment or had children who were kind of long term in remission and doing well, and having those
And it gives you hope there is a way out of it to do it, especially those children that are in remission as well. So it gives you a goal and a target. Really, this is where we're going to be, and that does give you hope to do it. And it's some of those mums are so awesome on there. I speak to reach out quite a few of them, and they fill you with inspiration of how they're coping with it as well, because everyone's different along the journey and things. And you talk about Alistair, and how is it with, obviously that's tough being obviously with Rupert, and then you've got to be there for Teddy, because obviously he wants his mum as well. And how obviously this with looking after a younger child, did Alistair have to give up work, or how did he manage it?
It was incredibly tough on Alistair in those early days, because I was feeding Rupert and couldn't do the overnights in hospital with Teddy. My husband did every single overnight for the first few months, and Teddy's first hospital admission was just over 5 weeks. Right. So that was, you know, every single night my husband was in the hospital. He went home, I think, on one occasion in 5 weeks. Teddy was, you know, at that time he was very, very poorly. He was very unwell. He was lying in a darkened room, sleeping or crying. It was also a heat wave, so there were times.
It was last July, wasn't it?
Yeah. It was you know, horrendous.
Degrees.
Yeah, we were at St George's Hospital in London, and it was 40 degrees. It was 38 degrees on the ward.
Wow. And there's no air conditioning, just fans, isn't there?
Well, we did actually have some air conditioning in his room, which brought it down to a wonderful cool 28 degrees, right. Which would usually feel very, very hot for a room. But given that the corridor in the ward was 38 degrees, his room actually felt relatively cool. But it was, I think that week or so at St George's will go down in his memory as pure hell.
For Alistair?
Really? Yeah, for Alistair. It was.
And did he have to leave work?
He was off. He was off work.
And they supported him,
period. They've been supportive. He was off work for a good, I think, 2 months.
Okay.
after the initial diagnosis, and then during Teddy's induction chemo, because of having Rupert to look after as well, my husband had kind of a bit of a part-time working pattern. Okay. So where we had chemo every 3 weeks, my husband would sort of take a week and a half off, work a week and a half, week and a half off, work a week and a half off. So it was very stop, start. And to kind of complicate the matters, my husband had started a new job 3 weeks before Teddy was diagnosed. So it was all very, very new. It was, a new organisation that he didn't know as well.
Also, there's some employers' rights as well if you just started a new job, so you're not covered for. Yeah,
exactly. So you've got that to think of, and thankfully they've been very supportive. Brilliant. And been very helpful. But it is a big worry in the early days about how you're going to manage. And since Rupert has been older and been able to be left, with other people to look after, it sort of shifted, and now the hospital stays are mainly on me, because I'll be going into.
You can leave Rupert more at home, and
I'll be going into hospital with Teddy, and then Rupert can be looked after by grandparents or go to nursery, while my husband can continue to work. So,
and it's hard to find that medium of like bills need to be paid, mortgages need to be covered, you still need to eat and heat the house, and you need to look after Rupert, and then find that medium of being with you, being with Teddy. It's you're juggling everything, and it is tough.
Yeah, absolutely. With me being on maternity leave, my husband just not having a job wasn't an option, and not just that, but my husband is very passionate about the work that he does, and for him it's his career, not just a job.
Right, yeah.
So it was really important to him that he made his new job work, because it's something that he wants to be doing long term. So returning to work kind of wasn't just about the immediate requirements of, okay, we need money so that we can pay the bills. It was about us having a future life as well,
and that's the hardest thing, is that you've planned to have the next 40, 50 years in employment or do what you want to chase, and all of a sudden there's swerveballs thrown at you, like the Teddy's diagnosis, and that stops. The world stops spinning for a little bit, because that can't continue. You can't see a way out of, or way forward of how you're going to get on with what you want to do, and the ideas of holidays, the ideas of doing mundane things like for me it was going to the football, or you just can't do it. And that's the hardest thing, is that your life stops, and it's hard to pick yourself up mentally as well, especially when you're trying to support everyone as well, and you support your child. It's tough. But Teddy's starting radio now. The question, how are you doing? Honestly, we talked about how it was at the time, but how are you doing now, and how are you feeling? And
I mean, I'd say that now I am generally doing okay. There have been really, really dark times on this journey. I'm definitely not going to lie about that. And to be honest, I'm pretty sure there will be more dark times as well, where, my mental health will take further knocks. But, I have been managing to pick myself up again after it, with the help of a lot of therapy.
And so as in you see someone for?
I do, yeah. So I've got support through the Marsden, so the hospital that treats Teddy, that provides support for parents as well as the children who are on treatment as well. Teddy's a bit small, really, but my husband and I definitely needed to access that, and I accessed it at really kind of the best time, or the time when I needed it the most, because there's quite a long waiting list for it, and by the time I accessed it, I really needed it. So it would have been good to probably have it before.
Well, that's the thing, but it's like being thirsty. Once you're thirsty, it's sort of too late. You need to get it in early, so you prepare yourself and build tools, I think. But it's good. And do you find that it helps you to give some sort of armour, protection for your mental health?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I kind of accessed the therapy when I was really kind of at crisis point. So, it would have been good to have probably had it.
And how far? You don't have to. How far into journey was sort of crisis point for you?
I think for me, I really hit the wall around November time. So Teddy was diagnosed.
Months into
he was diagnosed in July. We had about 4 months of induction chemo, and induction chemo is for neuroblastoma. It's the initial chemotherapy that they're given, and Teddy's particular regime was. It was 7 or 9 days every 3 weeks. And you kind of think going into that, it's going to be rough for 7 days, and then we'll have some time at home,
It's
and
the
then
10
when
days
they're
after
again.
it gets,
Yeah, it's the surprise hospital admissions.
yeah.
It's the constant appointments
It's the
in between.
relentlessness.
It's totally relentless. So, of that 3 weeks, we might spend 7 days inpatient having chemotherapy. Teddy would come home for one day. We'd go up to the Marsden for a full day for a scan. Come home, bam, that night, spike temperature in the local hospital. He's neutropenic, starting on IV antibiotics for 4 or 5 days, perhaps. Get back home, more scans.
Yeah.
Another day at home, and then suddenly you're packing for your next round of chemotherapy, and it was really relentless.
You find though it's just tough. I remember it's just tough to plan, and that's part of the problem. Is that I love routine now. For me, for my mental health, it's routine. I love knowing that I got to get up in the morning, take Rafe to school. I know I got to pick him up before. So those 2 times, I know I've got to be somewhere. I know I go to work. Weekends I don't like so much, but it's the routine. But there is no routine in that initial period of you. You just I remember getting a phone call, Kerry. Right, Hugh's got a temperature. Come home now. I
Yeah,
have to take him in. You know how long I'm going to be in there for? 3 days, 2 days, 4 days. Everything's cancelled, and you
yeah,
need things in your life to keep you going. It's like my mind for me was gym, golf, and trying to watch some football. That was my mental saviours to keep me going during Hugh's treatment. My wife was the same as going out, going for walks,
yeah.
meeting her sister. But all that gets turned upside down. So how are you supposed to save yourself as a parent? Which is it's difficult. And then, like, how
Exactly.
did you find sort of what did you go to try and apart from the therapy to relax or take your mind off it? Was there things that you did or
Well, I mean, as you do, I find routine, really helps me mentally, and I did really struggle with the complete loss of that. I coped much better with the planned inpatient stays for chemotherapy because I knew they were coming up. We would plan appropriately for them. I would have everything in place so that it would go smoothly. I really struggled the most with the unplanned admissions where we would suddenly, you'd go in to give Teddy his meds at 10 o'clock, take his temperature, and go,
38.1?
yep, 38. Let's pack a bag. Let's call the hospital. We've got to call an ambulance and get up there, within the next hour to start him on
How
IV
far was your
antibiotics.
shared care away from your house?
So it's actually not that far.
Okay.
It was, depending on the traffic, it's probably about 20 to 40
Okay.
minutes. But we don't drive, so that adds kind of an extra complication because
Right.
you'd have to be finding someone to give you a lift.
Yeah.
Or when he was neutropenic, we were told to call an ambulance. If it's the middle of the night, you can't delay. He needs to be on IV antibiotics within an hour.
Yeah.
Call an ambulance, and
Which
he's gotta
adds
get up.
more stress and trauma too with blue lights and things, especially
Yeah.
to Teddy as well.
Yeah, it's
Well, you
all
might
very
enjoy it. I
stressful.
remember Hugh used to love that. But no, some kids enjoy certain strange things about this stuff where the parents sort of
Yeah,
fret about. But like I say, it's the routine of it was something that I need now, and I struggled with during the treatments because it's like, so I'll be in the middle of a golf course trying to relax. The next thing, like you get a phone, right? He's 30.1. Let's go.
yeah,
I can't run off hole 6 then, and you try and be as quick as you can. But it was like you can't do anything in the future, and that's the
yeah.
relentlessness of childhood cancers. Obviously, the initial diagnosis and trauma of it, but it's almost like your life is nothing for the next 8
No,
months.
it
You're
never,
basically a taxi service and staying in hotels, hospitals, and just taking them for treatment.
you're on call 24/7, and cancer can require you to, be at its beck and call at any moment. We had something quite similar recently. My husband doesn't get to see his friends very much because he's working as well. Like a lot of the time when he's not doing childcare, it's because he's working. So he had an evening where he was playing Dungeons and Dragons with some friends, and they had literally just gone into Weatherspoons afterwards to get themselves some dinner. And I had to call him and say, Teddy's 38.5. You need to come home because I've got to go up to hospital,
Yeah.
and you've got to be here because Rupert's asleep in his bed. And yeah, you kind of can't really plan anything, and that's very, very difficult. And in general, I'm quite bad anyway at doing the things that nourish me when I'm having a difficult time. So if I'm having a difficult time mentally, I will struggle to find the space to do those things that nourish me and make me feel better.
Yeah.
So during Teddy's treatment, especially the early phases, I really wasn't doing anything at all for myself. My whole life was caring for Teddy or caring for Rupert, and trying to get some
And also,
sleep at some point.
I'm not I don't understand. It's different for a dad to talk about child care and things like that because we can go out to work and escape the initial 6 months of feeding the intensity of it all. But I remember always talking to my wife and just losing her feeling like she's lost her meaning, sort of thing, because she's involved in the early stage of the child, and with Hugh being treated as well. It's, you lose your identity. I remember
Yeah.
a lot of the women tell me who have had young children, they lose their identity, and you're a career woman. All of a sudden, that's on the back burner, and it can affect you mentally as well. I suppose having nothing that, do you know, where
Yeah. I 100% completely lost my identity in those early days, and you do lose your identity a little bit anyway when you have a very small child. So I had got through those initial 3 months with Rupert, having two children and adjusting to that, and feeling like, okay, well, maybe we're going to start coming out the other side now, and I'm going to get a little bit of my life back, and I'll start, doing slightly more normal things. And then, cancer hit us,
yeah,
and that just wasn't on the cards anymore. And I, being the primary caregiver who was at home, all the time caring for, either child, either a very sick 3-year-old or a very small baby. I really didn't have anything in my life that wasn't childcare or cancer, and that's not a great place to be. Really.
yeah, because you need to fit in, like you say, nourish for you. So, what is self care for you? How do you, if you were to say what you're going to have one day to look after yourself, what would you do?
Yeah, so seeing friends, going somewhere, reading a book. I'm quite a solitary creature by nature, so I would like time on my own. I like to go to a cafe and sit and have a coffee and read a book on my own. I also like to go out and see my friends. And just doing any of those things kind of was very, very difficult for a while. And my husband did institute a rule when we are able to, when we're at home, that Wednesday nights are my night, and on a Wednesday night I go out.
Yeah.
And I leave the house and I do something which isn't being at home and caring for children, whether that's arranging to meet a friend, or he's like, just go to the pub,
Yeah.
take a book and go to the pub.
And you doing that?
Yeah.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
Feel better for it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Like, just going into, our local wine bar with a book and sitting and being out of the house with 0 children.
Just being
to look
Kat
after.
again.
Yeah, just being Kat and sitting there, drink a glass of wine, read a book, is really, really great. Or seeing some friends and trying to talk about something which isn't cancer.
It's tough because it occupies your world.
Yeah.
And that's all you want to, as it's so. But also, I felt that when I was talking to my friends about it, the therapy helped me in a way because I could deliver all my woes and fears to the therapist and leave myself vacant to talk to my friends.
Yeah.
It's like leaving an empty void where they don't want to hear about my. Well, they do initially, but then you feel bad about talking about it all the time. I used to, but then they just wanted to talk about what they're doing in their lives, and I didn't want to be that person just consume the conversation on my own. But therapy kind of helped me to do that in a sense with my friends, and
yeah,
I don't know if you found the same.
Yeah, definitely. For me, therapy gave me the space to vent the thoughts that seemed too taboo or too dark to vent anywhere else, even to my husband. Often, those kind of thoughts that consume you in the middle of the night. I needed to offload those somewhere with someone who wouldn't think I was crazy.
No, I know, and I totally agree with you because the beauty of a therapist isn't as like the message to anyone that's struggling. I think who's listening to this, therapy isn't about what people say. It's like go and see about a normal life, but it does help to offload a lot of problems from any sort of walk of life that you are. If you are struggling, I suppose from anywhere, I struggle. I went for 14 months, and I wish I would have gone earlier because I tried to hide everything.
Yeah.
But it does. All of a sudden, you walk out and you think, oh, do you know what? I feel great. And if I haven't been for a while, I don't know about you. I'm like, actually, I need to go. And then you walk out, you're like, wow, okay, I'm free again. I can breathe. But it does offload a lot of stuff that you can't talk to your wife about or your husband about.
Yeah.
They don't want to hear about it.
And I think often those thoughts which feel like they're so, they're so dark or so personal that you can't put words to, you can't speak them out loud. When you do actually speak them out loud to someone who's impartial, they sort of lose a little bit of their power. And it's something that I had experienced before because I had previously had therapy for OCD. So I had undiagnosed OCD for a really, really, really long time. And it only came to a head when I had Teddy initially. And kind of in that perinatal period, my OCD got very out of control. And thankfully, a really great midwife and referred me. And then the psychologist who came out to assess me, kind of really quickly after talking to me was like, you sound like you've got OCD. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
I thought OCD was just flicking off light switches
Right.
and things like that, and like that's not what I was experiencing. It was a lot of like, you know, kind of internal, what I now understand are intrusive thoughts, and then
Was that,
yeah,
do you
actually
find that
saying,
that's been carried? Did that resurface when Teddy got diagnosed?
yeah, but I was very glad that I had that previous
So you had the tools
diagnosis.
to put it back to where it came from, sort of thing.
Yeah, because looking back, you know, with the therapist I had at the time after having Teddy, you know, we could kind of see that I had OCD for a very, very, very long time,
Right.
probably since I was around 7 or 8.
Okay.
And it had affected me to a greater or lesser extent through most of my life, and at points where I honestly, you know, I had felt like I was crazy. I didn't really know what was going on with me. I felt like something was very, very wrong.
Right.
But I didn't really know what that was, or that this was actually not a normal phenomenon,
Right.
but actually, you know, it was
You felt a bit
something.
different.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just very aware that there was something not quite right about
Okay.
my thought processes, but I didn't really. I interpreted that as being wrong and bad,
Right.
not as having a brain which is actually just wired differently
Okay.
to other people's, because OCD is kind of a form of neurodiversity.
Right.
People with OCD, our brains literally just work in a slightly different way to other people. Our flight and fight responses are kind of faulty. My brain responds to thoughts as real physical threats.
Right.
So
So if you think something's
yeah,
coming, but it's not, it's almost
yeah.
like irrational or.
Yeah, so pretty much everybody at some point will have experienced intrusive thoughts, and that's a thought that pops up into your head really randomly, and it could be something actually really not that bad, or it could be something really horrible. You know, like most people have probably had a moment where they've been waiting for a train and they just suddenly go, "I could push that person in front of a train."
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
that happens because brains pop up.
Allow yourself to come up with different thoughts. Yeah.
Different thoughts pop up from your brain all the time. Your average person will think, "Oh, that was weird. I'm not going to do that." Might think that was a strange thought and then move on. Whereas someone with OCD, they catch on to it and go, "Oh my god, I want to push someone in front of a train. Where did that thought come
Does
from?"
that tend to snowball then into panic?
Really
And sort of...
snowballs into panic. So OCD stands for obsessive compulsive disorder. So the obsessive part is that you have intrusive thoughts which are repeated as well, so the thought will recur.
Right.
And then the compulsive part of that is that you perform actions or compulsions. They could be physical or mental. So, you know, it could be like washing your hands because you get an intrusive thought that you've touched something dirty and it's going to make you sick. So you wash your hands and that relieves it for a short period. But then the thought comes back and you need to relieve it again. Or it could be like a mental compulsion, like researching something obsessively or thinking obsessively about something, or obsessively reassuring yourself that you're not going to push that person in front of a train. But the compulsion is always unhelpful because it only provides a temporary
And can that spill into sort of hypochondria and health anxiety for?
Yeah, definitely.
Especially
for
when
some people, yeah.
And then
That really kind of wasn't like the main theme of my intrusive thoughts. My main theme was harm.
Okay.
And the thing you really need to know about OCD, and which I didn't know, and was what led me to kind of, you know, have lots of really negative thoughts about myself, was that the intrusive thoughts that people tend to react to the most to are what's called ego dystonic. And that means that those thoughts are completely in contrast with you and your values and your, you know, the person that you are. So I would have thoughts about harm, like an intrusive thought about harming someone. And because that is the complete opposite of who I am, you know, I care about people. I love people. I want to care for my family and keep them safe. So having a thought about harm coming to someone was like an instant red flag in my brain, and I would cling on to that and think that I wanted to harm that person. I needed to do something to stop myself harming the people in my life. So I would do really silly things, like I would cut up cucumber with a butter knife because I was so scared that I would just accidentally stab my baby. That's not a normal
But has that
thought.
so when you obviously that's talking about, it's like obviously it's quite complex what you went through,
Yeah.
and obviously the therapy post Teddy being born
Yeah.
has helped nullify that. Has given you the tools to, so if you get those feelings, you know how to put them back into place.
Yeah, massively. And I think a huge part of it was just having that understanding
Yeah.
about myself and my thought processes, and that my intrusive thoughts aren't actually
It's
my
not you.
values. Yeah,
Yeah.
they're not me. My thoughts aren't me. They're just thoughts.
It's almost like that. Have you seen the chimp paradox when they talk about the chimp in the front of the brain and the
Yeah.
chimp runs away with the thoughts? It's almost like sort of that was the chimp running away with your thoughts, your OCD.
Yeah.
And then, but that must have, when Teddy got diagnosed, that must have re-emerged for you
Yeah.
briefly, because it
It
can
did.
unsettle your mind. I mean, it can bring back anxieties and stresses that you think that you didn't have before. And I know that some parents I've spoken to never thought they were mentally weak. Not weak's the wrong word, because you're
Yeah.
never mentally weak, but you weren't prepared for things so
No.
much because you never was ever taught about to deal with stuff. But then I think when they had therapy, they quickly realised actually there are ways to deal with stuff, and actually there's things that they've been doing well all their life, and it's not to them to blame for certain anxieties and things like that. So
Yeah, and things did resurface to some extent when Teddy was diagnosed, but in some ways actually not really to as much as it could have done, or I could have,
so in that
could
sense,
have
you've
potentially.
successfully
Yeah,
done with
yeah.
your OCD,
The tools that I had already from therapy really
and
did
that
help
they
me.
helped you now subsequent the tools.
Yeah, so OCD is often called the doubting disorder because you kind of generally, you are doubting yourself, you're doubting the validity of your feelings and your thoughts. So it was very difficult dealing with Teddy's diagnosis and the way that his disease presented. Um, as a parent, you often worry about things, but you know deep down that actually something being seriously wrong is quite unlikely. So I would often feel like I was worrying unnecessarily about, the children's health. And it was a slightly scary experience to realize that in this instant, I had been right.
But that is, my wife was exactly the same as you. I was saying, don't take him to hospital. He's fine. He's probably got a bug. But she said, no, there's something wrong. But isn't it lucky that you made them do that?
Yeah, yeah, it really is.
If you
But it
flip it
kind of,
around, it's lucky that you made them do that and you were anxious about that, because then he's got the treatment that he's got so far in a position where he is now.
yeah, it was a bit difficult given that actually in that situation my intrusive thought was correct. Generally, my intrusive thoughts are not correct, and I need to treat them as if they are not correct. But it threw me a little bit that in that case my
It's
intrusive
mother's
thought.
intuition.
Yeah,
But sometimes I would say, if you ever got an intuition with your child's health, though, always go and get him checked out. Which is, I mean, even if you think there's something wrong, and the doctor's not saying, always make sure you double check. I think personally, because I think it's important to.
yeah, and I don't know if you found this as well, but it can be really difficult with your younger children as well because you worry in a slightly different way about their health than you did before because you've had experience
But you've
of
been
theory of
exposed to
illness.
it. And I think that's difficult. I think it's the same, and I didn't find it so much. My mum had breast cancer, and she's all right now. I didn't find being exposed to my mum's cancer so much affected me, but being exposed so much to Hugh's cancer has affected my anxiety. And also, I turned 40 in April, and I find for myself, sort of your own mortality comes into question a bit more, because it's almost, I've seen all that, and it's hard to put into words about, but I'm just like, well, how can I help myself to not get anything? But then I look at the same as Ted, I look at Hugh and I think, well, they didn't do anything. They never smoked, they never drank, they never did
Yeah,
anything. And that's the bit that makes me think, well, is it just a game of luck?
yeah, almost all bets are off
Is it?
in a
Yeah. Is
sense
it? So you might
when
as well
you've dealt
enjoy
with
your life now. If it's a
yeah,
game of luck, you might as well enjoy your life. And it was almost like I went for a bit of therapy for that. It's almost like, right, what can you do? Well, I think that the actual cancer said to me, hold your nerve. That's what he said to me,
yeah,
because there are no rules to this. He's just unlucky, and yeah, he's different because you're exposed to it. Like, so I just find it is tough when, like, Rafe's got a cold, or I've got a 9-month old at home as well, and you're getting
yeah,
all the blood results through, and you think, oh my god, what have they? But you don't. It's just because you're exposed to it. But to a normal person walking down the street who's never been exposed to it, they just got on life normally, and so would I.
yeah,
And I would have been the same. I remember taking the boys for blood tests at pre-COVID, and not even imagining anything coming up in the blood results. But now, if I was in the same, I'd be like, wow, right, I'm worried now. But for no
Yeah.
reason. But I suppose not is a reason because we've both been exposed to it.
Yeah, because you've had the unthinkable happen to one of your children,
Mm.
it no longer feels kind of outside of the realms of possibility that something really serious could
But
happen to another of your
but then I
children.
liken it. I fell off a ladder about 6 months ago. I don't want to get up ladders, but I'm not going to fall off the next ladder.
Yeah,
So it's, and then one of the things that the therapy when I went, it's like Rafe is Rafe, he's not Hugh,
yeah,
and Jude is Jude, he's not Hugh, and so on. It's like holding your nerve. And as much as it's not the, I don't think it's the most psychological sound term that he used with me, is to just hold your nerve, because sometimes you just got to hold your nerve strong.
yeah. And to me, that sounds like sitting with uncertainty, which is a really important part of therapy for OCD, because people with OCD hate uncertainty. We want to be certain about things. We want to know that our
It
thoughts
sounds like
are not true.
I'm not going to speak.
No, it's. I think it's those kind of feelings are a lot more common than we probably think.
But I think everyone who's been exposed to something of some sort would be scared of it happening again. It's like
Yeah,
walking in a field of lightning. If you've been struck once already, I think. But it's funny how, like, say, I didn't get affected so much. My mum was diagnosed with it, but with Hugh, definitely, because maybe I was more on hand with it. And the same as yourself, and I know that my friends are more open-eyed to or open-eared to it now when they're with their own children, and I'm more attuned to it. I hear more about it now, and I never heard about it 2 years ago,
yeah,
and maybe because I didn't want to hear about it.
yeah. Partly that too.
But yeah. But like you say, obviously you've managed your mental health so far. And what about sort of friends and things? We talked about friends, physical. Do you find like going out for walks helps?
Yeah, I think getting outside, getting some sunlight, having a
And how do
walk.
you manage that at hospitals with the?
I mean, that can be really, really tricky when you're in a hospital looking after a small child. There's not that many opportunities. I realised I was in with Teddy when he had his stem cell transplant. At the beginning of the year, he had his second and final stem cell transplant. I was swapping in and out with my husband and doing, a couple of days here. And there was one point I think I spent 5 days and I didn't step outside past the reception at the hospital in 5 days. And then when I did step outside, I was like, oh my God, I've not actually been
Felt sunlight.
outside. Yeah, I've not felt sunlight on my skin in 5 days.
Do you feel like your own physical health has deteriorated a little bit over the last? It's almost 10 months now, 11 months.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm exhausted all the time. We sleep very badly with a sick child and a small child. Your days are kind of.
How do you mitigate? Have you got any way that you've started to try and get a pattern? At least you get your head down for some sleep. Have you tried to do anything, or is it just a case of get it when you can?
Going to bed at 9:30?
There's a little one
So
sleep now.
nice to
Is
be
Rupert sleeping through the night?
He often sleeps through the night, but he wakes up every day at 5. And then Teddy often doesn't go to bed until 9. So that's a long day of parenting.
Yeah.
And there's not really very much space, to fit other things in the cracks. To keep yourself.
Or even to talk to Alistair at night. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just
Yeah,
like there's just ships in the night half the time because obviously you got to talk because talking to your spouse or partner is part of the therapy together and dealing with it because it's a team effort. But if you're not talking, that's I mean that must be tough as well at night time if you're getting ready to go to bed at 9 and you're off. You've got about half an hour. You want to watch a bit of TV or relax or something.
Yeah, it can be really difficult to carve out time to be together, and we've learnt that we really do need to do that because we're not just parents of Teddy, we're a couple, and we need to have a life of our own, where we get to digest what's been going on and connect as a couple, not just as parents. And where possible, we've been trying to do date nights and things where have a grandparent come over and watch the kids after they've gone to bed, and we'll pop out and have a meal, and that really is very much needed.
But you find us kind of refreshed as a team after.
Yeah.
Then you've talked it through and it's difficult because people meet and have different ways of dealing with stuff. I mean, there's always two people always going to be different in the way that they handle stress. But I think coming together and communicating, especially like date nights, is a must. I think
it helps us work as a team rather than two individuals trying to hold up the world on our own. And my husband and I did deal very differently. Particularly in the early days, we did deal very differently with it. My husband, particularly, I think, because of going back to work as well, had a much more long-term focus. He also, I think, just generally had a more positive, not positive outlook necessarily, but he, I think, believed that we were on, this treatment journey, and that we would finish treatment and we would have a life afterwards.
Yeah.
And I very much fell into the despair pit.
Yeah.
So after kind of dealing with the initial grief emotions at diagnosis, I really got stuck in the despair kind of
But
pit.
you were the first person to hear of what happened.
Yeah, and I
Did you have to sign all the forms as well? And
we did all that together,
Okay.
but I think I just had a much more negative outlook of the future than my husband did. So it was quite difficult for us to see eye to eye on pretty much, on a lot of things, because my husband was proceeding as if we were going through a really difficult time of treatment and then we would be out the other side, and he wanted us to have a life after that. And then for me, I felt like I was living in the before.
Yeah.
And I felt just absolutely certain that we were going to lose Teddy. Now, I don't know. We're still in treatment. We don't know what the outcome's going to be. And
Teddy's doing well.
he's doing well at the
The
minute.
present's a gift. That's why it's called a present.
Exactly. And I'm learning now more to live with the uncertainty of not knowing now what the future brings. But I was in a state where I really I felt 100% certain that we were going to lose Teddy.
I think it's easy
it was difficult.
jump to the worst conclusion, because I think when you hear the word cancer, your mind jumps from... I remember being exactly the same thought pattern as you. Is I've heard it, and then I've gone, wow, okay, right, I've gone to the worst case scenario at the end. Bang on a second, there's a hell of a journey in between there.
Yeah.
And that's what they call it, a marathon. Because you start a marathon off at mile 1 fresh, and then mile 26 when you cross the line, you may look beaten up, knackered, but you finish the line. One way or another, you're going to finish the line. But there's a long way in between. I remember the doctor telling me that. But I sound quite similar to your husband in a sense, where I was like, right, this is the plan. We're going to stick to the plan. He's going to be fine. We're going to go through it, and we're going to deal with all the bumps along the way, like an aeroplane. We're going to hit turbulence, but it's going to settle down. Every time you go through a turbulence, there's going to be a calm bit, but there's going to be turbulence, and that was always my view. And then my wife was a bit more pragmatic and say, well, this is the reality of it. And she sounds quite similar to sort of the way that you're thinking about it. Whereas, well, hang on a second, no, we're in the present now. We're getting through the chemo now. We've got to get through this and that. And I was like booking a holiday in July to go to Orlando.
Yeah.
She's like, no, we've got 1 week ahead of us.
I definitely hit a wall. Probably, I suppose, if you're doing a marathon, you're going to hit a wall when you've run a hell of a long way already, but you've got even longer still to go. I
think if you're looking,
you don't know how you're gonna get through, and you can't see an end. You can't see a positive end to the situation that you're currently in. All I could see was there was a negative.
But when you're running a marathon, though, at that present time, your legs are still running.
Yeah.
So at that time, you are still running. So liken it to your situation right now, you are still running. You're in the marathon, so there is an end to it. So you are still going. So I think it can analogy, but it is tough. It's like I remember saying, but there is no. And the thing I remember, that there was no end or length to the marathon. That's the thing that scared me the most of it. It was how long is this for?
Yes, how long is a piece of string?
How long is it? And how am I going to live after with uncertainty? And that was the thing that was bugging, like not bugging me, but it's like, okay, so how long have we got to do this? And is it going to be normal? But it sounds like Teddy's doing great at the moment.
Yeah, he's he's incredibly resilient. Like I think most 3-year-olds are. He bounces back incredibly well after really tough treatments. He puts me to shame.
Well, kids do. They're so resilient.
Yeah.
I remember like Hugh going in for an operation, and I was like panic stricken. They give you the beeper, and you're like, oh my god, I couldn't. I said to him, I've hold the beeper. I can't deal with the anxiety of holding the beeper. And the beeper goes off. And what is it? Oh, he's fine. He's in recovery. And he comes out. He's just eating a jam donut. And I'm thinking, I've just been stressing the whole time, but actually you're fine. And they do give you, and they say when you look at them, I just think, where's the fear?
Yeah. He doesn't have, he doesn't have any long-term fears. He has, his world is very short-term. He thinks about what's he gonna eat when he wakes up from
what's he
his
gonna play? What's he's playing Lego as well?
Yeah, what's he gonna do when we get back to the flat after radiotherapy? Is he gonna play with some more Lego?
It's brilliant in a way though, isn't it? Because ignorance is sometimes bliss. And I think we learn fear as adults, don't we? We sort of, if you didn't have any experiences, you wouldn't have any fear. So I think the kids, they don't have any experience or know anything about it, so they don't have any fear. So fantastic for them to live in the present and just enjoy being a child.
Yeah, I can definitely take a leaf out of his book, because I think living in the present is a really big part of dealing with uncertainty, and learning to be comfortable with the uncertainty that comes with having a child on cancer treatment. You do need to be comfortable to, think to yourself, do you know what, I actually don't know what's going to happen in a month, 6 months, a year, but I do know what I'm going to do this afternoon, and I have a
Sometimes,
reasonable, yeah.
but sometimes it's a case of how bad things just have some. As much as it's hard to think about having gratitude, but sometimes it's when just having a sense of in the here and now, just being thankful for what's here and now. I mean, sometimes you can just think in the head and you get all wound up about the future, and they get sad about but just sometimes it's just looking across and seeing them in the bed having treatment, just be like, go and give them a massive hug and just be grateful. And and it's hard to put gratitude into context when you go through such a bad time.
Yeah, and we're just coming up to Teddy's fourth birthday. He turns 4 on the 11th of June, and that's a huge milestone for us. And to be honest, when he was diagnosed, it was one that I felt completely in despair of him ever reaching. I didn't even know if he'd make it till Christmas, let alone whether we'd see another birthday for him. So for us to be, a couple of weeks away from his birthday and planning
He's
his
having a big
birthday
birthday.
presents. We're not having a big. It's
You're gonna
halfway through radiotherapy,
Oh, yeah.
unfortunately. It is on a weekend, so he'll be at home. But yeah, the idea at the beginning that I would be looking up his birthday presents and thinking about, I'll get him a Thomas balloon and these kinds of things. I'm incredibly grateful that we're in that zone now, that we have these
But
times, and just trying to enjoy that we do have this time and not thinking about
and I think that's so
what might come
important
after.
about not and the message I would say to everyone is just not think about the future so much. Same with everyone, even if you're not having a child under treatment like we've had and stuff. Just thinking about the future can just sort of depress you a little bit because, well, not depress you, but make you anxiety because you actually can't control anything.
Yeah,
And
it's really, really tough, and it's been kind of difficult in the last few months for us as well, because we made the decision, me and my husband, to try and fundraise for some additional treatment for Teddy, and because we're doing that, we do actually have to think a lot more about the future and planning, and there's a lot of burden on that of deciding whether or not you do it, and whether you want to put your family.
so I've seen the fundraising. So we'll talk about. So you were telling me outside earlier that he's got neuroblastoma. There's a trial that isn't available here. Is that right?
Yeah, so it's currently on a trial basis at Memorial Sloan Kettering in New York. It's a phase 2 trial, and they're accepting children from abroad. But obviously you have to self-fund it, so it costs around £250,000. And there are really, really positive results that have come from that phase 2 trial. But kind of frustratingly, there are just there's no movement in getting a randomized phase 3 trial in Europe, which is what would be needed to get that on the NHS treatment plan. Okay. So a lot of families who get a high risk neuroblastoma diagnosis, you're faced with that decision of whether or not, on top of dealing with treatment for cancer, which is a huge burden on families anyway, whether you also want to go ahead and try and fundraise hundreds of thousands of pounds while your child is on active treatment, so that they can access this. And that's a huge burden on families.
So if you get to the 250,000, when will he access that treatment?
So it would be after his NHS frontline treatment has finished, because it's a maintenance therapy. It's aimed at preventing relapse, because one of the reasons that outcomes for neuroblastoma are very poor is that it has a high relapse rate. So preventing children from relapsing is really kind of critical to improving survival rates. And we went back and forth on it a lot, deciding whether or not it was the right thing for us to do, and thinking about not just practically of whether we thought the treatment was worth fundraising for, and whether we thought the evidence was compelling enough, but also whether we thought it was the right decision for our family, because the emotional burden of doing it is tremendous. The time spent doing it is tremendous. You know, spending all that time working on fundraising when you could be with your sick child is a big decision to make, as well as, you know, as well as the thing with Instagram is it's a wonderful community, but if you are fundraising, you also need to open yourself up to a very wide audience, and you're sharing a lot of very personal information with people, and your family and your child kind of become public property when you do that, and that's quite a big decision to make for them as well as for us, because by deciding to go ahead with this, we made a decision that, you know, we're going to be putting Teddy out there quite publicly, and locally now people know Teddy in our village.
Yeah. I remember you saying that. So on Sky News, Sky News about the fundraising.
Yeah, people have seen us on the news. People have seen us in the paper. You know, might see someone at the park or the pub, and they'll go, "Oh, is that Teddy?" And they know who he is. And that's a different kind of experience. And, you know, still not quite sure how I feel about that for him for the rest of his life.
If you can raise the 250 grand and get him to the face, I think that's what you need to do. I'm not my opinion, but I just think you do, as a parent, you do anything. If I remember saying about Hugh, if he needed moon dust, I'd find a way of speaking to Jeff Bezos and getting up to that moon.
Yeah.
I'd find a way somehow to do it. But I say, if people want to find out where they can fundraise and things, it's on your Instagram account, isn't it? Which we'll link into the.
So we're on Instagram and Facebook as Teddy and the Big C, and we're fundraising with there's a UK registered charity called Solving Kids Cancer.
Brilliant.
They're dedicated to supporting families with neuroblastoma.
Okay.
Not just families who fundraise, just any family that's going through this journey, and but they do also help families with like the practical aspects of accessing treatment abroad, and they host the fundraiser on their website. So all of the money is held in trust for Teddy and can only be accessed for medical treatment.
Right.
And they help with all the planning and helping you do all the practical stuff and the costings and booking flights and literally all of those things, which as a parent dealing with a child with cancer, you just don't have the mental space to be looking at flights and accommodation and insurance applications.
So what's next fundraising for you then? What are you planning next?
Well, we are just on the cusp of £75,000 at the minute. We've been fundraising about 3 months now, so we've got until the end of the year to raise the 250. Okay. So we've got a team of people kind of working away in the background, organising events and lots of stuff locally that we're doing to try and raise awareness, and so people
can check out your
they can check out
if they want to do anything like a cake stand or
it's all those little things that other people do that really help us on this journey, and all the people who do cake sales or sell cakes at their local school fair or do a sweepstake at work for Eurovision.
All goes towards it.
Yeah.
It's going to really a good cause right now, all that thing. So we've got 2023 Kat and 2022 Kat. What would 2023 Kat tell 2022 Kat?
Probably that I can do more than I ever would have thought possible, and that I have more strength than I ever could have imagined that I would have. But that I also need to recognise the gargantuan effort that takes, and be kind to myself and show myself a little bit of grace for it's really the huge trauma that I've gone through, and not just that I've gone through, but I am still going through. This trauma is not finished for us. We're very much still in it, and we're being, all of the experiences that we're having are compounding and adding to the trauma that we've already experienced, and just giving myself some grace and some recognition for the strength that we've shown.
Well, I just think it's so important. Sometimes I think you've just got to step back and think, if you were to write on paper what you've been through in the last 9-10 months, and you go over to someone, they'd go, wow. And I think sometimes it's very easy to get yourself lost in everything that's going on, and you've just got to turn around and say, I've done well. And I think that's so true, to pat yourself on the back and just say. And also, you've had 2 children in the last 3 years. That's hard enough in itself.
Yeah.
And getting yourself back to normal. I've bear witness to it 3 times. And I just think that's hard enough in itself. And then to be going through what I think sometimes you've just got to put a step back and just give yourself a pat on the back and say, do you know what? I've done well. And I think you have done well. I think everyone listening to this will say you've done well.
Yeah, people always say to me, "Oh, I don't know how you do it," and to be honest, I'm like, I don't know how I do
You
it
find a
sometimes
way.
either. But I also, at the same time, never feel like I do enough. So it's it's two sides of the same coin, and I feel them simultaneously. So,
But
people
no,
are a bundle of contradictions.
you've done really well, and obviously Teddy's doing really well now, and we wish him all luck with the radiotherapy and things like that. And you going to him? You going back there tonight now?
Yep, going back
Okay, cool.
tonight.
And when's his birthday?
11th of June.
11th of June. All right.
So he's got lots of brio because he's absolutely obsessed with
Is he?
He's obsessed with trains, obsessed with Thomas the Tank Engine. His best day ever was getting to ride a tube train with his dad. They got to go in the cab.
Awesome.
He still talks about it as his special day.
Brilliant.
So he told me this morning when he got up, I said, "Oh, did you have any nice dreams?" And he went, "I dreamed about my special day with Daddy."
Oh, amazing. Well, listen, Kate, it's been a pleasure having you on. Hopefully, you've told everyone how you are dealing with your adversity, and I think everyone's going to be completely overwhelmed by your strength and how you are dealing with it. And so, we wish you all the best of luck and everything like that. And this community and family that we have with this podcast that are listening to it, reach out to your Instagram, which we'll tag into and just be there and just follow your journey with Teddy.
Yeah, thank you for having me on, and I really hope some of the stuff we've discussed can help other people who are going through difficult times themselves, and show people that it's possible to kind of get through this, and something new normal as well.
And you're showing everyone that you can.
Cheers.
Thank you, everyone.